Coming up, we meet the new editor of Indian Country Today, another look at the redistricting process and teaching the Ojibwe language through creative ways. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from Indian Country Today.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. ASU offers the only online undergraduate digital media literacy degree, teaching students how to recognize and combat inaccuracies on all platforms. They are using cutting-edge tools and tactics to separate fact from fiction in a digital world overloaded with misinformation. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is Indian Country Today.
Amarawa Hopa. Thank you for joining us. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. The U.S. House of Representatives is aiming to pass legislation to extend a year-end deadline for Alaska Native corporations and tribes. Some corporations have yet to receive federal coronavirus relief funds, and others face challenges dispersing the money they have received. A spokesperson for Alaska Representative Don Young says the clock is ticking. He urged House leadership to act in scheduling a final vote on the legislation. Tribes began receiving funds in the spring of 2020. However, many tribes and federal agencies reported issues with the funding rollout. Some of the issues included guidance from the Department of the Treasury for use of funds that changed over time. The bill will next go to the Senate for a vote. The House has yet to consider a similar bill the Senate passed in October. In eastern Washington state, work is being stopped after ancestral remains were discovered at a construction site. The site is at a residential construction plot near the Assateague County Fairgrounds. A Washington state archaeologist determined it is most likely a native burial site. The 1990 Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act says descendants of those uncovered must be consulted. Under the act, cultural items like human remains, funerary, and sacred objects are supposed to be returned to the descendants. A spokesperson for the Nez Perce tribe says the nation was notified last week when crews found the gravesite. The tribe is working with the property owners to properly handle the remains in order to make sure its disturbance is minimal. In Minnesota, the White Earth Ojibwe Nation could be the center of a big renewable energy project. Tribal small businesses and the White Earth Tribal Council are partnering with a Washington-based business firm called Total Spectrum. The goal is to have renewable and sustainable energy for tribes. The firm will conduct an analysis on the tribe's needs by strategic development, construction requirement, workforce needs, and financing. White Earth voters will have the opportunity to make a decision by April on the proposed energy projects that arise from this process. A new report by the Miss Foundation for Women is calling out the lack of philanthropic investment in Indigenous women and girls. The report calls for the creation of a funding platform and Indigenous-led nonprofit focused on reproductive justice. A recent assessment from the report shows less than 3% of foundation funding was specified as benefiting Indigenous women and girls. To address these low levels of philanthropic investment, the foundation assembled a Women's Council of Indigenous Leadership. Through ongoing meetings, Indigenous women will lead the work of developing a full-scale Indigenous women's reproductive justice funding platform. Koya Whitehat Artichoker co-authored the Indigenous assessment. She hopes the report finds its way to people ready to make change.
And there are other communities who have organizations like that that are dedicated to reproductive justice. Our community doesn't have one. So I think we're asking the question, what would that look like to make that kind of investment? And we're asking, people who have the resources to really think about that as part of what it means, again, to right historic wrongs.
The full report can be found at forwomen.org. A school in Utah is naming a Native student to homecoming royalty for the first time in its history. Mahala Sutherland says she never expected to be crowned homecoming royalty at Southern Utah University. Sutherland's dad attended an Indian boarding school as a kid, where it was against the rules to wear traditional clothing. She says her mom had been bullied by white classmates in traditional public schools whenever she displayed her heritage. Sutherland says she entered the pageant to showcase her culture in a quiet rebellion to a time when her parents could not.
So the biggest thing that made me want to apply was just, I wanted to represent the Native population on campus because they so often, get pushed to the side in general, especially in this predominantly white institution. So a big part of what I do is just being a positive role model.
The former president of the Native American Student Association is now setting her sights on better Indigenous representation at her school. And those are the headlines for Indian Country Today. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Coming up, puppets and podcasts in Ojibwe. We meet ICT's new editor, and redistricting is on the line. A daily podcast presents language in a humorous way. Meet puppeteer Michael Lyons. He's the creator of Buju, Nana Buju. He's Leech Lake Ojibwe and says the comedy show is more for fun than an actual language class. It's a regular feature on the Bemidji, Minnesota radio stations KAXE and KBXE. Welcome, Nana Buju. Please introduce yourself.
Buju, Nana Buju Nindijan Nakaz. Hello. Nana Buju is my name.
Well, it's very wonderful to have you here. Tell us, what is your show all about? What is the goal that you try to reach communities with?
Well, in the last year, we on New Year's Eve, it'll be the 1-year anniversary of our 1-hour daily live stream Ojibwe language podcast. And so what we do every morning is we get on, me and the lovely and talented Natasha. Ikadon Bujo, sweetie. Hey, everybody. Natasha is over here. And Michael, we get on every morning and we teach an Ojibwe word of the day. And I'll tell some stories. Sometimes I tell traditional Ojibwe stories like how Beaver got his tail. Or sometimes I'll tell stories like what happened between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And I don't even want to get into that, but we're here. But sometimes we tell celebrity gossip, but mostly it's a comedy show where we teach Ojibwe and talk about Ojibwe culture and language.
This idea of comedy is something that so many Indigenous folks use in their communities every day. It's how we cope through a lot of things. I think there's a lot of teasing going on in Native communities every single day. For you, why is comedy so important to bring into this show?
It just kind of came along. Well, here's the story. When we started, Michael Lyons, he calls himself the rock star cartoonist. He had a comic strip called Ojibwe, which we should have called the show, huh, sweetie? I know, that's so dumb. But he had a comic strip called Ojibwe where he'd teach an Ojibwe word of the day. But then people started writing in and I was like, yeah, that's all well and good. But how do you say this word? So we got together, we said, hey, you know what? We should pronounce the words for the kids. But then just when I got on camera, I realized sometimes it's best to sing a song to learn a word. Like our very first podcast, the word of the day was coffee. But in Ojibwe language, we say black medicine water for coffee. So to say it, you would say, Makade mashkiki wabu. Well, that's hard for some kids. So I said, let's turn it into a song. Makade mashkiki wabu, makade mashkiki wabu, niwi eya, niwi eya. And then like Natasha would chime in, and it was just sort of funny. And then it being a live stream, so we did like little videos for a couple of years, but then this year people could show up in real time and leave little comments and stuff. And we would get Native people from all over the country and even like from other countries. There's a guy who shows up every day from Ireland who was adopted out of his tribe in Canada. And non-Indian people too show up.
That's wonderful. And is your goal audience children, or are you teaching, everyone the Ojibwe language?
We're sort of, and we're teaching everybody. My audience is 98% over 30, probably 40. So I kind of feel like it's those of us who watched Sesame Street in the 70s have come back together for a Sesame Street show, but it's for grown-ups.
That is so wonderful. And this may seem like a very simple question, maybe even silly, but why do you think that teaching the language, the Ojibwe language, is so important?
That's not a bad question at all. I've struggled with it. I don't know. For me, like on the show, lots of times we'll pray in Ojibwe. And I'll talk about, okay, this was how I grew up. My grandma was a boarding school survivor. And she was a evangelical born-again Christian. And so I would tell a story about religion and my family and my walk. And then Natasha might go outside and put out some tobacco and pray in Ojibwe. In a way, it connects us with our ancestors. Spiritually, it sometimes feels more ceremonial to speak in Ojibwe. So for that reason, it's kind of important. At the same token, it's not that important. You can pray in English too.
That's really interesting. You mentioned earlier that you have some reactions on the videos that you produce. Generally, what has been the reaction of your show?
Like 99% thumbs up. We have a really small audience. Like, I'm probably the worst performing YouTube channel I've ever watched. But we have the same kind of 30 to 50 people who show up every day. So for us, it feels like if we were doing a little comedy show or singing songs at a coffee house and 50 people showed up, I'd feel famous. Once in a while, we get people are easily triggered. I got into trouble. You remember a couple of weeks ago, the NFL came out with a pride flag, and they said, the NFL is gay and bi and trans. Well, I made some jokes about that, and people got kind of offended. And then I lost a gig. They say, hey, quit making fun of that. That ain't funny. The NFL ain't gay or whatever. So mostly positive. Once in a while, because it's the internet, a little bit of hate.
And what is your motivation to continue going forward with this show?
Lots of the money. Junia and the girls. No, get out of here. No. My motivation is to, I guess, just share what I know, create a little bit of a community of people who, have Native American grandmothers and stories, and just to be entertaining, I guess.
And what are your upcoming goals? What do you want to continue doing with the show, and what do you have your heart set out to do?
Last summer we talked about filming a half-hour television not podcast, but a pilot episode of a proper TV show, whether it be a couple of cameras, and like Natasha and I could be on camera at the same time. That might be nice. Yeah. And but we haven't gotten around to it. We're raising money to buy new equipment, so we might do a TV pilot and then try to shop it around to PBS, the best channel in the world. Quit sucking up to PBS. What, we're on there.
Well, that's wonderful. We only have a short time left, but I want to give you the opportunity to say a message to Native communities. I know we've been through a very hard time with the coronavirus and everything else. So what do you want to say to all the Native folks out there watching?
Oh, wow. You put me on the spot. uh, don't worry, be happy. No. I don't know what to say. It's going to be fine. You know.
Well, it was so nice to have you here, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Miigwech.
When we come back, we meet ICT's new editor. Indian Country Today is making history again. On Friday, Jordan Bennett Begay was named the next editor of ICT, making her the first female editor in our news organization's 40-year history. She joins us today from New Mexico. Hi, Jordan, and congratulations.
Hi, Leah, and thank you so much. I'm still mind blown.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you about. You and I haven't had the chance to speak since your promotion, but I'd love to hear what your reaction has been given all of the outpouring of support that you've received.
Sure, the support has just been phenomenal. I think a lot of people, at least just from social, are really ready, for the change and are accepting of it, which is really great. Again, my head's still like spinning and I feel like I still have to like catch my breath every now and then. And it's, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it and the role in this really big opportunity to continue to take this newsroom forward. I mean, Mark has done such a great job of, bringing it back from the ashes and creating, something so great that I just love working for.
Mark, of course, was the editor from 2018 until 2021. What does this transition mean for ICT as an organization?
So, I'm really a big believer in, what the mission is for the organization, in changing the narrative and uplifting Indigenous voices and telling, Indigenous stories. It's really, we're just going to be taking it furthermore and continuing to build a path for young people to start their careers and to create their careers and to, bring their communities with them and to also, again, just like change the narrative and to highlight how powerful our stories are and hope for a greater change for our communities. So not a lot's going to change except just more going forward and growing more and just thinking about all of our cousins, grandmas, aunties back at home.
I should mention that Mark Trahant is not leaving the organization of ICT. He's staying on board, just taking another position, and he'll be leading some really exciting projects that I'm sure we'll announce very soon. For our viewers at home who may not know what an editor is or what they do, tell us what your new job responsibilities will be.
Oh boy, it's going to be a lot of just leading a newsroom and kind of helping shape the coverage, what we want to see. It's more of like the big thinking and the being the visionary of what we want to see and what we want to see, in terms of news coverage. But also, I think for me, it's looking what kind of newsroom I want to create for young people, and that's ultimately what I want to do is to create a newsroom. And it's already been done too, right? With Mark recruiting everybody, and we have so much talent in our newsroom. I just want to build onto that and. But of course, I think about what's in the newsroom, our policies, but also thinking about like the greater media landscape and how we as an organization and all of our staff and our reporters, our correspondents, how they're contributing to the greater change in narrative. Because I think ultimately that's what we want to do. So that's, it's more like the big thinking and the visionary and just changing the narrative.
2022 is gearing up to be a really big year for news stories in Indian country, namely the Department of Interior's boarding school investigation findings and, of course, the midterm elections. Tell us, what kinds of stories are you hoping that the digital team in Indian country today focuses on, and what are your goals for that kind of coverage coming up?
Oh, I mean, you said it, midterm's gonna be a huge year. I'm really excited just because we're gonna be looking again at the census 2020 census 2020 data and how that reflects or affects like redistricting, right, which ultimately affects how congressional and state districts are redrawn, and that also affects a lot of the politics and policies and the candidates who will be elected into these offices, right? So I'm really looking forward to, again, the midterm election is gonna be a huge year because in 2 years the presidential election is gonna be happening again. Climate changes, of course, is still in the front of my mind, so that's something I still want to look at going forward. Boarding schools, like you said, missing and murdered Indigenous relatives is another huge issue. Going forward, I want to look at, and and all of like good, like great things that Native people are doing. I really want to highlight again the Indigenous excellence. A lot of entertainment stories are coming out right now. You had Rutherford Falls, who made a major big breakthrough this year. Reservation Dogs. There's just so much talent out there in the entertainment industry, and I really want us to capture that. And also, I really want us, Indian country today, and our staff to own those stories and tell those stories from our perspective.
Sure. Well, Jordan Bennett Begay, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Across the country, state legislatures are drawing maps to reflect new districts brought on by the census population changes. The Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission is deep in this process right now. ICT correspondent Karina Dominguez talked to experts about voter suppression efforts throughout the state, and she joins us now to talk about her reporting. Hi, Karina.
Thank you for having me on.
So tell us, where is Arizona at in this redistricting process right now?
Yes, so December 4th kind of wrapped up that public comment period. So now last week there were 2 meetings. Today there's a meeting. So they're in the final stages of drafting those final maps. So these will be the maps that Arizona goes by for the next decade. So right now, there's still meeting, there's still discussion on, where these boundary lines should be. But there is a deadline of January 1st in place. The commission is looking to have those final maps voted on by December 22nd.
And we've actually had one of the commission members on the show before. Tell us, what are the major changes that we're going to see for Native communities and their districts specifically?
Right. So one of the main, areas of contention right now is going to be Congressional District 2, CD2. So that's located in the northern and eastern part of the state. So largely right now it is a Democratic district. So Representative Tom O'Halloran is the one who represents that district currently. So under the proposed changes, that district would turn from Democratic to Republican. And so that has been one of the big concerns. Derek Watchman, he is a commissioner. He's from the Navajo Nation. He's been a strong advocate for making that a more competitive district. He says that as it is right now, one party is sure to win. So they want to see a few changes there. So basically making that more of a competitive district for Navajo people and a lot of the other tribal peoples in the area. There's a lot of Indigenous people in some of the more urban communities down there. So there's Winslow, Show Low, Pine Top. So they would like to include those large urban Native populations in their district. And there's also concerns about Legislative District 6. As well. So those are the areas that are really kind of in focus right now. But again, the main concern has been seeing a change from a lot of these competitive districts or districts that are heavily Democratic, and they're now being more favored by the Republican Party. So District 2, Congressional District 2 has been a main topic of discussion. So it'll be really interesting to see.
And what has been the reaction from Native leaders specifically about those districts? Is that something that they're happy with? Are they unhappy with it? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, the Navajo Nation has, made it very clear they're not happy with the way Congressional District 2 is currently drawn. Same thing with Legislative District 6 as well. The San Carlos Apache tribe has echoed those concerns, as well as the White Mountain Apache tribe. There is in total around 13 tribal nations who would be impacted, and they feel like the way the lines are currently drawn is diluting the Native voting power there. They've been very vocal about that. The way Congressional District 2 is currently drawn is an issue, but they'd like to see it largely stay intact the way it is now. They think that in 2011, when redistricting had occurred, that they did a good job of maintaining some pretty competitive districts.
Sure. Well, Karina Dominguez, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And you can read more on her story at IndianCountryToday.com. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. Thank you for watching. For all the latest news, go to IndianCountryToday.com. I'm Malia Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
This is Indian Country Today.